Sakhalin Island, Russia, April 2024. Less than a year before the destruction of the breach and the end of the Kaiju war, a 7-year-old Viktoria Malikova had just made her way over a hilltop in search of the legendary Kaidonovskys and Russia's pride, Cherno Alpha. There was nothing in sight, but she had to keep going until she found them. Snow was falling hard, and Vic was getting tired. She rested on a log, contemplating whether to continue toward the coast or turn back and head home. Her grandmother would be mad at her either way, and Cherno couldn't be much further. Just a few more minutes. Just another hilltop. As she got up and pressed on, it began to get darker, and her limbs felt heavy. Vic was so sleepy she could barely keep her head up. But she remained determined to go on. She had a reason. Her skin chafed by her frozen clothes. Each step she took felt like a knife cutting into her. Then the sharp pains began to numb, and Vic suddenly felt dizzy, then blacked out. A fire could be heard crackling nearby, and Vic was gently awakened by her grandfather. She looked around and found herself in some sort of cabin. Her grandfather had found her by following her tracks, and by the sound she made by supposedly yelling before blacking out. He told her that only a few minutes later her tracks would have been completely covered by the snow. They were to stay in the cabin until the following morning because her grandfather was quite old and couldn't carry her all the way back home throughout the night due to his bad back. After being questioned by her grandfather on why she was wandering alone so far from home, Vic explained that she wanted to see Cherno fighting a kaiju out at sea after she had heard about it on a monitor at school. Her grandfather then explains that the kaiju was approaching from the east coast of the island, and she was on the west, reminding her that she almost died for nothing, as she wouldn't have been able to watch the encounter from her position, regardless. The following morning, Vic's grandfather returned her to their cottage, where her grandmother was waiting. Vic's grandmother was relieved to have her safe at home, but scolded the child for her reckless actions from last night. All she could find out from her grandmother was that Cherno won the fight, but that wasn't enough to satisfy her. So the next day, on her way back home from school, she stopped at a bar frequented by senior citizens, too injured to work, and 3 of them outside told her the whole story. The kaiju was named Vodyanoi, after a water monster from Russian folklore, and was described as a fat, puffed-up toad, a really nasty one. 2 Russian Jaegers, the Mark II Eden Assassin and Mark I Cherno Alpha, were deployed against the kaiju. In the encounter, Vodyanoi spat some kind of acid on Eden, which ate through the Mark II's armour, and unfortunately killed both pilots. Cherno Alpha didn't like that, said one of the old men. She pulled an iceberg right out of the water, and she beat it to death. With an iceberg. A damn iceberg! Right before it got to the capital. The 3 men toasted to Cherno, and all other Jaegers and their pilots, insulting the anti-kaiju wall and calling Cherno their saviour. This shows just how important the Jaeger program was to public morale. People of all ages felt pride and strength through the Jaegers and their pilots. They felt like they had a fighting chance against the kaiju. Vic had a poster of Cherno Alpha on her bedroom wall, and would list the Jaeger's kaiju kills next to it. She had an incredibly rough childhood before the events of Uprising, but it said that as a kid she felt as if she was a Jaeger, armoured and powerful. The program instilled hope in people, even during the discouraging years following 2020. The precursors must have learned from the destruction of Eden Assassin and identified the acid attack as a potentially effective anti-Jaeger measure, subsequently reusing it in one of their later kaiju, Otachi. It was as if the Kaidonovskys were plagued by the acid. First they lose another Russian Jaeger to it in 2024. Then, approximately 8 months later, Otachi's acid spit severely damages Cherno, contributing to the imminent destruction of the legendary Mark I. It's great to hear about Cherno's past battles, and it would be astonishing to see a live-action visual of this one. Until then, we'll always have Gypsy Danger bashing Leatherback and Otachi with shipping containers and an oil tanker. The event covered in this video was seen in Pacific Rim Uprising, Ascension, a novelisation that is strongly recommended, as it's packed with lots of extra information that adds on to both the original Pacific Rim and Pacific Rim Uprising. Consider reading this novelisation, then re-watching both films. That will be it for this video. Thank you for watching.